It all started on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, the kind that feels like it'll fade into the blur of a busy week. I had just finished a parent-teacher meeting at my son's school. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. But I didn't know that a simple conversation that day would mark the beginning of something I'd never imagined, something that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about boundaries, timing, and my own heart. His name was Daniel. Mr. Carter to the kids. He taught English, and my 14-year-old son had been in his class for the last few months. I'd seen him a few times before, in passing. Polite. Soft-spoken. Always kept things professional. There was nothing about him that screamed trouble or romance. But that day, when we spoke after class, something was different. Maybe it was the way he smiled when he mentioned how bright my son was. Maybe it was how he listened, like he actually cared about what I was saying. Or maybe it was just me, tired, lonely, and too caught up in life to notice that I hadn't felt truly seen in a long time. We talked longer than I expected. What started as a few minutes turned into nearly half an hour. The classroom was quiet, most of the school already empty. The late afternoon sun poured in through the windows, casting a warm light across the desks. I was just about to leave when he said something that stopped me in my tracks. He looked at me, not as a parent, not as someone just dropping by, but with a softness I didn't know how to respond to. Then, almost hesitantly, he stepped closer and kissed me. It was brief, almost like a question rather than a statement. And in that moment, 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind: my son, the rules, what people would think, what this meant. I pulled back, heart racing, unsure whether I was more shocked by what happened or by how much I didn't want it to stop. I know how it sounds. A teacher. A parent. Lines were clearly crossed. But what no one saw was everything that happened before that moment: the long days, the quiet dinners alone, the conversations that felt more real than anything I'd had in years. It wasn't just a kiss. It was the beginning of something complicated and forbidden. That kiss was just the first step into a story that would test everything: my loyalty as a mother, my understanding of love, and the thin line between right and wrong. I wish I could say I walked away that day and never looked back. But the truth is far messier than that. Because sometimes, the people we're told to avoid are the very ones who make us feel alive again. And sometimes, a single moment can pull you into something you never saw coming. And that's exactly what happened next. After that day, I told myself it was a mistake. A heat-of-the-moment thing. I convinced myself he probably felt embarrassed too and wouldn't mention it again. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something had shifted. Not just in him, but in me. I couldn't stop thinking about it: his eyes, the way he looked at me, like I wasn't just another parent, like he actually saw the woman behind the tired face and everyday routines. A few days later, I ran into him again during school pickup. It was quick, just a nod and a smile, but something in the air felt heavy. Charged. I tried to keep my distance, keep things normal for the sake of my son, but avoiding him only made it worse. My mind kept replaying that moment over and over. And the more I tried to forget it, the more it stayed with me. At home, things felt strangely tense. My son, completely unaware, talked about Mr. Carter like he was the coolest teacher he'd ever had. "He listens," he said one night over dinner. "Like really listens." I smiled and nodded, pretending everything was fine, while inside, my emotions were tangled in guilt, curiosity, and something else I couldn't name. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something dangerous. Every time I passed the school gates, I felt like I was walking a tightrope. I kept wondering, was he thinking about it too? Did that moment mean anything to him, or was I just reading into it because I hadn't felt that kind of connection in years? Then, one afternoon, I got a message. Just one sentence. No name. No details. "Can we talk?" "After class." And that's when I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. That message sat on my phone screen longer than I'd like to admit. I must have opened and closed it 10 times before I finally replied with a simple okay. My heart was pounding, not just because of what might happen, but because I knew the line between right and wrong was starting to blur, and once you cross it, there's no going back. After school, I waited in my car for a few minutes before walking inside. The halls were quieter than usual, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the walls. I found him in the same classroom as before, sitting at his desk like nothing had happened. But when he looked up, his eyes told a different story. They were searching, hesitant, but full of something unspoken. We didn't touch. We didn't even sit close. But the way he spoke, it was clear this wasn't about one moment of weakness. I know this is complicated, he said, voice low, careful. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. My breath caught. I should have shut it down right there, reminded him we both had responsibilities, he as a teacher, me as a mother. But instead, I listened. I let the moment linger. The truth was, I hadn't told anyone. Not even my sister, who I usually shared everything with. Something about this felt too fragile, too tangled. I didn't know if it was real or just the result of two lonely people clinging to something that felt meaningful. What made it worse was how well he connected with my son. The way they laughed in class, the way he encouraged him. That bond made everything more confusing, more dangerous. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. And if anyone found out, the consequences wouldn't just fall on us. From that day on, everything changed. I tried to keep my routine the same as school drop-offs, work meetings, family dinners, but inside, I was restless. Every time I saw him, even from a distance, it was like a silent storm passing through me. I didn't know how to act normal around him anymore, especially when my son was right there, talking about his favorite teacher like nothing was out of place. But for me, everything was out of place. We started seeing each other occasionally, quietly, always after school hours. Nothing happened beyond deep conversations and stolen glances, but even that felt like crossing a line. I kept reminding myself of the risk, how this could ruin his career, my relationship with my son, even my place in the school community. And yet, the pull between us only got stronger. It wasn't just attraction anymore, it was something deeper, something that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. Then came the school event. Parents, students, and teachers all gathered under one roof. I tried to avoid him, but it was impossible. The tension between us was visible, at least to me. And then I noticed someone watching, my sister. She caught a strange look pass between us, and I could see the questions forming in her eyes. Later that night, she called me. Her tone was careful, but sharp. "Is there something going on with you and Mr. Carter?" My heart sank. I denied it, but she didn't sound convinced. I knew the walls were closing in. One rumor, one slip, and everything could fall apart. And just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, my son came home from school the next day, looking upset, quiet. He tossed his bag aside and said something I never expected. "I heard something about you and Mr. Carter." My heart froze the moment he said it. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the panic was already crawling up my throat. "What do you mean?" I asked, pretending not to understand. He didn't look at me. Just stared at the floor and shrugged. "Some kids were talking in class. They said you and Mr. Carter are seeing each other." I couldn't breathe. That word, seeing, hit harder than I expected. I knew kids talk. Gossip spreads like wildfire in schools. But this? This was dangerous. "And what did you say to them?" I asked carefully. He shrugged again. "I told them to shut up. But I don't know, Mom. Is it true?" That moment broke something in me. I looked at my son and saw the confusion in his eyes. He didn't sound angry, just hurt. Like the idea of his mom and his teacher crossing some invisible line had shaken his world. And honestly, it had shaken mine too. I wanted to protect him from it all. But how do you explain to a teenage boy that something you never planned just happened? Before I could respond, my phone lit up. An unknown number. I picked up without thinking. The voice on the other end was calm, but direct. Hi. This is Principal Harris. I need to speak with you regarding a matter involving Mr. Carter. It's urgent. Tomorrow morning? I barely got through the rest of the evening. My son stayed in his room, silent. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to process what had just happened. The rumors weren't just whispers anymore. They were spreading, and now the school administration was involved. I didn't know who had started it. Maybe a student overheard something. Maybe a teacher picked up on the tension. Or maybe it was my sister. She hadn't called again, but something told me she knew more than she let on. The next morning came too fast. As I walked into the school office, everything felt surreal. Principal Harris greeted me with a firm nod, her expression unreadable. Then she gestured toward her office door. "Please come in," she said. And sitting inside was not just her, but Daniel. Mr. Carter. I had no idea what was about to happen. But I knew this was no longer just about feelings or quiet moments. This was about consequences. The room was silent the moment I stepped in. Daniel looked tense, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Principal Harris gave me a polite but cold smile and motioned for me to sit. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me, but I kept my face calm, even though my heart was pounding. She started carefully, her voice calm but firm. "We've received some concerns from parents and staff about an inappropriate relationship between a teacher and a student's parent." My stomach turned. I wanted to speak, to defend us, to explain, but I didn't know where to begin. Daniel shifted slightly, and then, to my surprise, he spoke before I could. "There's nothing inappropriate happening," he said, voice steady. "We talked a few times after school. That's all. I never crossed any line in school or with her son." I glanced at him, confused. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't telling the whole truth either. He was trying to protect me. Principal Harris studied us both. "You understand how serious this is, right? Even the idea of favoritism or blurred lines is enough to cause problems, especially when students are involved." I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said. "And I'm sorry if anything I did caused confusion." There was a long pause before she finally sighed. "For now, there will be no formal investigation. But Mr. Carter will be reassigned to another grade level starting next week. We just can't afford any more whispers." My chest tightened, but I nodded. It was over, or so I thought. Later that evening, just as I was beginning to process everything, my sister showed up at my door, looking pale. She stepped in without asking and handed me her phone. "You need to see this," she whispered. It was a screenshot of a message. Sent anonymously. It read, "If you think switching classrooms will hide their secret, think again. Everyone knows. It's not over." In that moment, I realized the real danger wasn't what had happened between us, it was that someone had been watching us closely all along. And they weren't finished. Not even close. For a few seconds, I just stood there, staring at the screen. The words felt like a threat, but they were also a reminder. What had started as a quiet connection had now become something public, something exposed. My sister sat across from me, waiting. "Do you have any idea who could have sent this?" she asked. I shook my head. I truly didn't. But whoever it was, they wanted control. They wanted to stir fear. And it was working. Over the next few days, Daniel kept his distance, just as the school requested. He didn't reach out, didn't try to explain or continue anything. And honestly, I understood. It wasn't just about us anymore. There was a teenager caught in the middle, a school on edge, and a silent observer somewhere in the background still watching. The anonymous message never led to anything more, and eventually, like most gossip, it lost its heat. But it left a crack in the foundation I'd been trying so hard to rebuild. I talked to my son one night while we were doing dishes. I told him, in the simplest terms, that sometimes adults form feelings they don't fully act on, but those feelings can still cause problems if not handled carefully. He nodded, quiet but listening. I just didn't want things to change, he said. And I promised him they wouldn't, not between us. As for Daniel, we didn't speak again for a long time. Not because of guilt or anger, but because sometimes the right thing is letting go. The connection we had was real, but it came at the wrong time, with too many consequences trailing behind it. I still think of him sometimes, how he looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than just a mother passing through school corridors. But now I know, not every story has to end with someone. Sometimes, the lesson is in what we walk away from. And in the quiet after the storm, I found clarity, I found strength, and I found a version of myself that no longer waited to feel seen. Because in the end, this wasn't just a story about a teacher and a parent. It was a story about timing, temptation, and the strength it takes to walk away when your heart wants to stay. 49.